right. So like I said, Officer Hagen, we always start with like your journey into, well, you're in education now, right?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
and into your current position, and then these guys will take it from there with questions.
All right. Well, I'm sure you guys have probably heard my backstory at some point, but we'll go over it again. So I grew up in Southwest Minnesota. I ended up in college at NDSU for criminal justice. In Minnesota, things are a little bit different. You can't just like graduate and go to the academy and be a cop. You either have to go to 2-year law enforcement program, or you need a 4-year degree and go to the summer academy. So that's where my mind was at. I appreciate education, so I wanted to do the 4-year degree and then the summer academy just to kind of keep my options open for like a federal job, things like that. So I did get a 4-year degree, even though a lot of people say, well, why'd you get a 4-year degree, you know, just to be a cop. But that's what I chose to do. I ended up going out west in North Dakota for about 6 months before Valley City called and offered me a job, and I've been here since 2010. So started off as patrol, of course, and then I moved into field training officer, so there's a little bit of a education piece right there, training the new officers. And in order to train or educate in law enforcement, you do need training to do that. You need to go to a class called Method of Instruction, so you can, you know, teach officers and you know what to do, and you only can teach certain areas of your expertise. So mine, field training officer, was one of them. And then also I got into like the defensive tactics and ground control and spontaneous knife defense, things like that. So that's what I teach to the officers. But I did like that, kind of more educational law enforcement. I wasn't the guy like going out there and writing tickets doesn't really motivate me that much. Some people it does, you know, troopers, that's what they do, and that's a form of law enforcement. For me, I got into the job for different reasons. I do like to talk to people, educate people, whether it's people I deal with or officers. So when school resource officer popped up as an opportunity, I was interested. I applied and I got the job. Of course, you have to go to training for that too, because being a school resource officer, which I'm sure we'll get into, is very different law enforcement than patrol. It's just very preventative and building relationships rather than like reacting to crimes and responding. So and I've been in the school since 2017. I love what I do. And there's several reasons I got into the school. Once my daughter's a little bit older, I'd love to, you know, help out with coaching and things like that. And I love being around, you know, you guys. There is, you know, I don't want to say tension, but there's that gap, you know, that we need to kind of bring the community and the trust back together with law enforcement and build those relationships. So I want to be a part of that as well. So that's kind of the overview, I guess, if we want to open up to questions, or if you guys have any questions about that.
Who wants to start?
I can, sure.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Brooke.
you start.
What is the most interesting part of your job?
Like as a resource officer, or just a police officer? Either one?
Resource officer.
Well, you know, patrol, obviously you see more crazy things. That's more like the wild stories and stuff like that, stuff you can't make up. Resource officer, what was your question specifically? What's the
Most interesting.
interesting? For me, again, it's building those relationships. Like I said, getting to know you guys, and then when you guys are adults, for those of you who stay here, and just having those relationships and helping out, again, more preventative, getting to the homes for people who need help, because SROs aren't here to like arrest kids or bust kids or, you know, fight the crime in schools. We're not here for that. It's a totally different reason. It's a totally different mission. So I would say that's it for me, is just that different aspect of law enforcement in the school.
How do you interact with at-risk students and help them?
So there's several different ways. Of course, just trying to get to know them, you know, get them comfortable with me and, you know, willing to report stuff if they need to. It's kind of a little bit jack of all trades, because I can help, you know, whether it's if teachers report something, principals, if it's through the counseling center, if they call me down for something concerning, if students come straight to me. I work with Child Protective Services and Social Services. Sometimes they'll call and say, hey, we have a report of this home and this kid who might be mistreated. Can you, you know, come over and help us with that? So there's kind of all different avenues where I sometimes get involved. It's not just kind of one area. It's often from several different angles. You know, sometimes it's someone's friends, and then I call them in that way, so.
pros and cons of being a resource officer?
Pros and cons, well, I mean, pros has to be like dealing with you guys is much more positive in general than dealing with, you know, just going to calls and dealing with people on their worst day, right? People are stressed out, people are angry, people are annoyed that we're there. For the most part, you guys aren't like that. You guys are positive and fun to be around, so that is definitely a pro. I don't even know what a con would be. Maybe not getting to work with the officers as much because you get used to that camaraderie and, I had the same partner for, like 3 or 4 years and, we kind of did everything together. We worked together and then we went and worked out and lifted together and stuff like that. So just getting out of that routine and sometimes like during school, people think, well, you have the good hours, you get weekends off, but really during school, I get like no vacation time, no anything, because I can't just call an officer in and say, hey, can you cover for me Monday and Tuesday? We can't do that. So it's a lot of hours, a lot of work, even after school hours, so I'd say maybe that's the con. My summers are pretty flexible, but during the school year, I'm very, very busy and committed.
What's the most difficult part of your job?
As a resource officer, for me, I don't wanna like overshare, but it's like, times it gets frustrating when I wanna help. When a kid comes to me with a concern or something's going on, or for a friend, or something that's happening at home that CPS makes me aware of. I'm very solutions oriented and I wanna help immediately, and sometimes through our system, whether it's through, different hoops we have to jump through, different things we have to prove. I can't always help in the way that I wanna help, or sometimes, we don't have the result that I want, whether that's, getting someone out of a home or, things like that. It can be very frustrating, because I feel like people come to me for help, and then if it doesn't work out, I feel like, I kind of failed them in that aspect. So that can be frustrating, especially when it's, trying to help kids.
What does your average day look like?
So there is no average day. What I try to do, I'm up here for the most part, just because of the age of the students and how many of you there are. So I start my day up here. I have, meetings that are scheduled, like some every Monday morning, things like that. Different meetings that, sorry, I gotta turn this down, that I'm committed to. But otherwise, it's a little bit as needed basis. I try to get to the elementaries as much as I can, just to hang out with those kids. But I also get called to the elementaries for concerns more than you guys would probably think. It's not because these kids are committing crimes or anything like that. It's because they, report something to the counselor, or, there's a parent issue, or, maybe there's parents arguing about something and it's a custody deal and someone's angry. It's just all sorts of different stuff. But the 3 major roles of an SRO, like when you go to the training for it, it's like a week-long training. And you're there to be law enforcement presence, to keep people safe and be there if someone wants to report stuff and do the active shooter training, all of that. Then informal teacher, doing these presentations and trying to have you guys understand law enforcement more. And then informal counselor. Those are the 3 things, just building relationship and having you guys know that you can come and report stuff, and we're here because we want to get to know you and we're interested. So those are the 3 aspects that you focus on, but then you kind of branch off into other stuff.
So do you do a lot of like the law enforcement teaching throughout the school, or when do you?
Like presentations?
Yeah, presentations.
Yeah, it's a little bit, I kind of let teachers, I'm not gonna like force my way into the classroom, like you were nice enough to invite me in. So I kind of wait for that stuff, like I do the defensive tactics with Rourke, and we do the alcohol and drugs talk, and Englehart invites me in. I do, stranger danger and crossing the street up at Jefferson. We do, some bullying and harassment stuff. So yeah, there's all sorts of different presentations and stuff we can do. Search and seizure, I did a couple talks with, I think it was juniors, or I forget last year, in STARS class in Peterson. So just whatever teachers need, I'm willing to come in, so.
I had it, I don't know where it went. Oh, do you miss anything about being out in the town instead of the schools?
Yeah, like I said, it's very different law enforcement, so, for those of us who enjoy law enforcement, we're weird like that, so sometimes you miss a little bit of that action portion, and, I hear about different adults doing things out on the streets, and it's like I'm ready to get in there and deal with them and kinda help the guys out. So, but I get to kinda, scratch that itch a little bit during the summertime, I can do some patrol and kinda make my own hours, so I get to go out there and do a little bit of that. But really, my mind and my focus is all SRO stuff. I kinda left patrol behind a little bit, so.
Even in the summer though, do you still do some SRO stuff or?
Yep, so I go to we have a state safety conference for school officials and SROs, and we do training and active shooter stuff, and I'm meeting with Mr. Johnson, and we're doing, prep for next year, so that's why I don't do a lot of patrol, because I'm still focusing on SRO stuff even in the summer.
Do you ever come to work worried about what might happen during that day?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know what your definition of worried is, I don't come worried, scared, things like that, but it's of course I don't want anything bad to happen. I don't want anything bad to happen to any of you guys, but it's somewhat in my control. I'm here to help, but it's somewhat out of my control. I can't prevent every bad thing from happening. I just hope I can help or intervene in time, but I know there's a lot of stuff, and that's not just worst case scenario active shooter stuff, but I know of a lot of stuff that's going on that kids are struggling with, or, things that are going on at home for some people, so yeah, it stresses me out a little bit sometimes, again, because I wanna help, I wanna be a solution, and sometimes I can't just go in and do the solution I want to do, so, yeah, it stresses me out every once in a while.
What's it like going back and forth between the different schools?
It's good, it's a little bit change of pace, I like to see the little kids and, hear all the questions that they have, and like I said, get to know them, and it's just, each year, it's just they get more and more comfortable with me and wanna ask questions right away when you first come into the school and people aren't used to it. Some kids are almost intimidated or scared because maybe the only time they've seen police officers is when they've come over to their house, during a bad night, or had to arrest mom or dad one time. So they're kinda scared, they don't know what I'm there for, but now they're learning that, hey, Officer Hagen's here because he wants to talk with us and whatever, nothing bad's gonna happen when I see him, so it's nice to kinda change that perception for kids.
How often do the drug dogs come through the school?
Drug dogs, yeah, so we haven't done that a while, we need to do it. I've used a couple dogs, we don't have one here in town, I really wish we did. We used to have a trooper in town who had one. But the one in Jamestown, he's getting a little bit old, so this tires him out, a long sniff like this, all those lockers, so then it starts to not be as useful, so it's a little much for him. So I have another guy in Kindred that I use, so it's just kind of a random thing. Again, I don't bring them in because I'm suspecting a bunch of drugs in lockers. It's just kind of one of those things, we bring it in. If we find something, we find something, but that's not my expectation. So when I bring a dog in, it's not because I think you guys have a bunch of drugs in here. It's just, something we do. And sometimes we're trying to get it set up to bring the dogs to the elementaries too, not to sniff the lockers, but just so the kids can pet them and ask questions and things like that.
What happens if you do find drugs?
Then we deal with that, same way we would if we just find them normally. No, I mean,
I'm
we've found
serious.
drugs before, so, and yeah, not naive to think that there's never been drugs in the school, so we just deal with it like I would if I pulled someone over and found them or whatever, With you guys, it's a little different because you're underage, so of course we have to notify parents before I ask you questions and things like that, but there'd be school consequences and then legal consequences.
Okay, can you kind of explain the evolution or the changes school safety over through the years?
Yeah, I mean, good question. Where do I start with that, right? Obviously, Columbine changed everything. You guys have heard me talk about that. Nobody was ready for that. Schools weren't ready for that. Law enforcement wasn't ready for that. They treated it almost like a hostage situation, and that's not what it was. There was just, these kids started this, you don't wanna call it a trend, you don't wanna call it anything like that, but their mindset was so different than what anyone had ever seen. They didn't care that there was cops there, they wanted to kill as many people as they could, as quickly as they could, and that's all they wanted to do. And then people picked up on that, they wanna replicate that, these people who do that, they research us just as much as we research them. So they're looking like, oh, how could I do that better? Oh, those guys did it like that, how could I do it better? Oh, they did it like that. The guy at Virginia Tech, then he's like, well, I'm gonna chain these doors shut so they can't get in here and get me, then I can take my time a little bit. So they're out there trying to be bad, and they're trying to educate themselves on this stuff just as much as we are. The unfortunate part is, They're always gonna be one step ahead, okay? Because we always have to react to what they're doing. That's just the reality of it, okay? We can't get ahead of them and make their plans for them and do things like that. So they're always gonna have that edge of the unexpected, and we have to react to it. But that's why we train, and sometimes you guys maybe think, okay, why are we going over this again? Why are we talking about active shooter? I've heard this like 4 or 5 times. But it's all about that muscle memory. So if any of you guys, whether it's playing sports or practicing whatever you practice, you guys know about repetition and muscle memory, and especially in a stressful situation. Because if you don't have that muscle memory, your mind won't go there in a stressful situation. So you have to train that way, train as hard as we can do it. It has to be age appropriate. I don't want to traumatize anyone by any means. But the more you can replicate these situations, if it ever were to occur, your mind will take you back to your training. It will, trust me. Even if you're scared, even if it doesn't matter, your mind will take you there. It's crazy what the mind can do. But just the evolution of it, we're constantly learning, constantly learning. Then we have the swatting stuff. You know, now people are just calling in active shooter, you know, just to freak us out. You know, so now they're not even doing it, they're just reporting it. Now there's airdrop stuff going on, and it's just like, I don't know, people are just so fascinated with freaking people out and talking about violence. It's kind of a scary world. We just gotta do our best. We just have to train. There's gonna be more and more training for that in school, you know, coming over the next however many years. The one thing I could see is just, I could see it turning from schools and focus on other things. What I worry about is like at activities, like at a football game, we worry about school buses. You know, if someone just kind of pulls over a school bus and has access to kids, there's only one adult there. Daycares, we worry about daycares because what's a better way to bring a community to their knees than, you know, go and be violent at a daycare. So there's other areas where these pukes can kind of scare us that we also have to be ready for too, because I think that they know that schools are a little bit ready for it, that students, staff, and, you know, law enforcement is ready to respond for school violence, but not always violence out in the community.
So is there a lot of staff training that goes on yearly or?
There is, you know, much more staff training than student, and that's not because we don't want to train you, but again, it's to find that balance, because I don't want to scare anyone, I don't want to traumatize anyone, I don't want to go too far with, you know, things I talk about. That's not my intent, but what we learned from you guys, and got some feedback that, hey, we want to train too, we want to train too. So we started trying to do that. That's why we did that training this year with you guys in the classrooms. Because I want to train you like I do the staff. But again, I don't want to go too far with it and have you guys freaked out or stressed. That, you know, that's not my intent at all. And of course, then it has to be age appropriate. How can you involve, you know, any elementaries in a way where they don't get scared? Because we don't want anyone scared to come to school. That's not the point of it. It's just to be prepared, so your guys' survivability goes way up if anything weird happens.
How do you train, like, the kids at Jefferson?
So right now, we haven't involved them in the way that we involve you guys at all. This was the first way. So down there, it's just the conversations. I go in there and we talk about it. They're a little bit different. They all have a private door in their classroom, so they have, it's good. It can be bad because I feel like sometimes the teachers just rely on it and just say, oh, we just leave out that door and we'd be just fine. Okay, but what if that person goes outside and now you're stuck outside? So what we do at Jefferson is we just talk about it, again, in an age-appropriate way. It's a different conversation. One way we teach them, I teach at the daycares, and I mentioned this at Jefferson, is we call it like fox and goose, or you can call it different things. But if your teacher yells goose, that means all the kids fall in line, especially at a daycare level, and follow Mother Goose and get out, like evacuate, if they call goose. If they say fox, that means there's a fox and you need to hide in the den or whatever, so that's, you know, the hide. You know, and it makes a little bit of a, I don't want to say a game out of it, but it just makes it where the kids' brains will accept it a little easier. If, oh, do you want us to do goose or fox, rather than saying you gotta run or you gotta hide. You know, it's a little more scary that way. So there's just different ways that we can present it to kids where it's not quite as scary. We got a new book coming too. It's like a lockdown, but it's superheroes, so kids kind of think of themselves as superheroes, and we're gonna read that to them too for like kindergarten and first graders to help out.
So,
I asked my daughters this morning on the way into town, I said, you know who Officer Hagan is? Yeah. He came to my class, he talked about lockdowns. And they were just like, okay,
Yeah.
like they weren't scared
Right.
by it at all.
Yeah, they make it fun. What they wanna talk about is what they do to the bad guy. They're like, no, can I stab him with the pencil? Can I kick him? Can I do this? You know, and it's okay to have fun with it because I don't want them to be scared. But, and another thing I explained to them too, it's almost like you just don't get close to this person. Just think of it like tag, and we just talk of it differently. Like, so if someone came in, you just try to run away, get away, don't let them touch you no matter what they say, you know, so just different ways to explain it. But it's weird thinking that kids that young are gonna be talking about it and learning about it all through school. So, but it's just the reality, right?
Sorry, Coy, you were gonna say
No,
something?
no, it's fine. I was just gonna say like the hiding, like I remember the teacher would get us all in a little group in the corner or whatever.
Yeah.
Obviously they don't do that anymore. Is it different or?
Yeah, it depends, because it used to be that way, like they would treat it almost like a tornado drill or whatever. Hey, lock down and just go line up against the wall, or go huddle over here and just kind of close your eyes and duck down. But that doesn't work if someone just walks in the room, okay? You can do that to an extent, like let's say you're barricaded and someone's outside the door trying to do something, yeah, you can all huddle up in a corner and duck down to kind of be out of sight, you know, so they can't see anything. But no, the way these guys, you know, school shooters were training is they were just, that's what they wanted. They wanted people to just hide, duck down and be scared, and they weren't gonna feel sorry for anyone. So it's like, we can't do that. We don't want that type of fear or response.
How did you guys deal with like the thing that happened in Jamestown this past year?
The swatting, or that's what we call swatting, where they reported the active shooter, is that what
Yeah.
you're referring to? Yeah, so, again, law enforcement, we were already aware of this because it was happening nationwide. We were hoping it wouldn't sweep through North Dakota. It was kinda late coming through North Dakota, but it was like, earlier that week it was South Dakota, and then it happened in North Dakota and in Jamestown. The unfortunate part is the way those calls came into dispatch, we knew it was a hoax, just based on how they report it. They, you know, they don't know the name of the school, they weren't giving any information, so we knew it was the hoax, but we still have to respond. So that's what freaks everyone out, is because the cops still have to respond to the Jamestown school. They still went into a lockdown. Officers are still sweeping through doing a search. So people are texting their parents. Parents are getting text messages like, hey, we're on lockdown and cops are here. So of course, any parent would, you know, freak out. So it's unfortunate, but we have to respond and at least make sure it's nothing. And I've talked about that with the staff here. We put out some emails to parents. And it's like, listen, if we have a situation like that, we follow our emergency operation plan. We have a big emergency operation plan. You guys would go into administrative lockdown. Officers would respond, so don't get freaked out. We would come and make sure that there's nobody here, nothing bad is happening. That's just how it has to be. If there's an actual active shooter, we'd be getting so many calls from 911, and so many, I mean, we would know, right? So.
Is there anything you'd like to change about our school?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I'd like to change the entire school. I'd like to get a new school, right? Because this school was not built with safety in mind whatsoever. And that's just because they didn't have to worry about stuff 100 years ago, or however old this school is. So, I know everyone says, you know, the bones are good, we don't wanna spend that money, you know, that's not my thing to talk about. But, when you think about it, there's just, from a safety aspect, just that alone, there's so many problems with this school. It's like where people come in, they get buzzed in down by the cafeteria, and the expectation is just that they'll go to the office and sign in. Okay, what if they buzz that during lunch? They're supposed to go to Denise's office, instead they just go in the lunchroom and start doing some stuff, you know? And then every parent would be saying, well, why do you let them in a door like that? Why do you do that like that? You know, even the senior high door, any of the elementaries, it's like they get buzzed in, and then if they want to, they can go anywhere. They can go into a classroom, they can go and, again, it could be something like a custody dispute, where maybe dad doesn't have custody or there's a restraining order. He gets buzzed in and he just walks in a classroom and says, Johnny, you're coming home with me. Now all the kids are freaked out because some guy just came in and grabbed a kid. It should be set up differently. We should be able to lock down differently. Again, this is just my issues with the school. But the renovations will help some of that. We're trying to. Every year, Mr. Johnson is great about, you know, progressive thinking and safety and all of that. He is great as far as a superintendent and how much he pushes that. So we do, every year we're trying to do improvements and progress in our training and do all that stuff, so.
Like, isn't there a new remodel that's gonna help?
Yep.
I don't know, improve that situation.
Yep, to kind of have one access point a
Yeah.
little bit, and that will help, and, yeah, I think my office is gonna stay up here for some different reasons, but in most schools, you know, the principals and everyone is right there. So before you can just walk around a school, you come into one area, and then you get approved to actually go into the school. And that's how it needs to be nowadays, that's how it has to be. It wasn't that long ago that there was a career fair going on down in the Hack, and we had some mentally disturbed individual walking around the school and just walk in a trench coat, and then it's like, I run up there, but it's like, I have no idea where he went. He could've went up to third floor, he could've went anywhere. Just think how bad stuff like that can be. And then everyone's gonna be pointing the finger saying, well, this school, why are you guys doing this? You know, why didn't you guys keep the kids safe? And it's like, hey, I mean, come on, we're doing our best with what we have. So help us improve it then, you know, give us a safe school. But
How would you like evacuate, let's say, from this room up here? Cause I feel like if you, by the time you get down the stairs, like the shooter could have easily made it to that spot.
Yep, so that's the difficult part, and that's why we train the options. So if, you know, it just depends on the situation, because maybe Mrs. Brandt is on the intercom saying, hey, you know, he's down in the lunchroom and, you know, kind of giving us updates, and you guys feel like you can make it.
Is that how that works? Is the,
We can't guarantee that.
right.
Ideally, if we can give you information, well, not me, because I'm gonna be on a different mission, but, you know, administration, they're gonna be giving you updates and giving you as much information as they can, but there's no guarantee, because what if the stuff starts in the office? You know, what if someone, you know, takes out Mrs. Brandt, or what if she's not here, or, you know, what if nobody knows what's going on? So you're not guaranteed to get that information, but whatever information we can give you, we would. And then you also have those options too, and your teachers and you guys would have to figure out what's best for us. Do we wanna go for it? There are rollout ladders that we give all these, you know, so you guys can roll out a ladder and start climbing down, or get out on the roof if you have to. So there's different options that you guys have. Or you can barricade, make just an awesome barricade, have the rollout ladder ready, say, we're just gonna stay here and wait it out. But if we feel like anyone's up here and it's not a police officer, we're going out the window. You know, you just have to keep those options in play.
Let go on
So if
accident.
they come on the intercom and say that they're in the lunchroom, and then we go down the stairs, and then they move, what do we do? 'Cause
That's the thing,
No
that-
teacher's gonna let us in their classroom.
Yep, that's why you gotta weigh it, you know, because I feel like, you know, when you say evacuate, you know, everyone just thinks, well, I just evacuate, that's simple, I just run. It's like, it's easy to say that, but when you hear gunshots in a school, or you just hear screaming, you hear chaos, are you willing to take that chance and evacuate? I'm not gonna tell you what the right answer is. I know you guys will all do what you think is best, I'm not gonna second guess you, but trust me, like, when it gets crazy, like, it's not as easy to just say what you say you're gonna do. Oh, I just do this, oh, I just do that. You need to have options, and if you say, nope, I didn't run because I was too scared, there's nothing wrong with that, right? No one says you have to run. But if you think, I had to get out of there, I had to go for it, because in my classroom, I didn't think we could barricade and I wasn't gonna wait. I'm not gonna second guess you for that either. But there's no guarantees. I wish I could tell you guys something like, hey, just do this, you'll be fine. Trust me, if you just do this, you'll be fine. I can't. I have to just give you options.
So in a situation like that, as a teacher, how should a teacher respond? Like,
That same way, they're gonna do what they think is best, and that's how we train, is I try to empower them to have those options and be like, you guys, and you have to be able to change. It could go from evacuate, and like you said, all of a sudden you guys get down these stairs and you hear something real close and you run right back up here and start barricading, okay? Or maybe you're barricading and all of a sudden someone starts pounding on the door and you say, now we're evacuating, but we're going out the window. So it can change from one to another. You guys have to do what you think is best, and that's what I train the teachers too, is you guys gotta be able to change, based on the information you have. One thing we do know is these situations don't last long. You know, now it's just minutes before myself, other officers are gonna intervene and intervene in a very harsh way. So it's like, if you can make it a couple minutes, but also 2 minutes can feel like a lifetime, you know, when bad things are happening. So, a little bit of pros and cons there, but it's not like you guys are gonna be stuck in here for hours, with a war going on out there. It's gonna be a couple minutes where you guys have to survive with your options, and then we go from there.
And I will say, I don't wanna take over, but when you guys switched our training from the hide in the corner to the options, it was very intense, like the training that we did.
Yeah.
It was very intense,
Yep.
very, like, I went home feeling like, oh, I can't believe we have to do this. But at the same time, it was really empowering.
Yes.
because now it's like, okay, like I do have some tools that we can do, and just knowing like your options, like they call it. So
Right, and I'm
it
assuming,
was really good.
I'm assuming you get more confident the more we do it.
Yeah.
The first time it was probably overwhelming, like, I'm a
Mhm.
teacher, I can't handle this.
Yeah.
And then you do it more and more, and you're like, actually, I'm kinda getting the hang of this, I feel like I can do this,
Yeah.
you know? So, I hope it is empowering, so I'm
Yeah,
glad to hear
def-
that.
definitely is, yeah.
Do you guys do anything with like colleges? Like how do colleges react in like an active shooter?
Yeah, somewhat the same way, but, you know, it's different because they have open campus, they have all those different buildings, so when you're talking college, just like Parkland, Florida, you know, that wasn't a college, but it was an open campus like a college, and that's why it can be more difficult. He pulled the fire alarm to get everybody out, and so he had, you know, victims and people all over the place. College is tough, and that's why we just did that active shooter training at the college just a few weeks ago. I don't wanna say they're behind us, but they haven't trained as much as Valley City Public Schools have trained, and it's different. They've come and observed some of our training, but they wanted to do one, you know, for them, so they could see how would this look, what would this look like? So, again, it's the same type of options, but it's different. They're dealing with all adults, they're not dealing with juveniles, so everyone's gonna kinda do what they want. There's gonna be people all over, it's gonna move from one building to the next, so it is a little freakier, to be honest.
How do you expect us to know what to do at like a basketball game or in the lunchroom or even in the library when those are such open spaces?
Yep.
And sometimes you can't hear things over everyone screaming in there anyway. So how do you expect us to like know what to do or
Right.
be prepared to protect ourselves in such an open, unprotected area?
Right. So, you know, that's not ideal, but you have to have lunch, you have to have resources, you know, we have to do those things. Sometimes it might be during passing time. So I understand it's not ideal, but try to think about it. Again, I don't want you guys, you know, focusing on active shooter and thinking about it all the time, but it is good to think about and take your mind there. Just taking your mind there and be like, what would I do if they came into a classroom, or the lunchroom, I mean? What would I do if it was passing time? You know, it is the same options. You have the same three options. You can barricade yourself somewhere, you can just run, or if the violence is too close to you, I want you to fight for your life, you know? So the same options always apply, but it's gonna be a little different. You could be at the mall, you know, and something could happen. And again, you're gonna have those options to survive, but it's gonna look a little bit different. So, you know, I don't expect you to do any one thing. I expect you to use those options and just do whatever you have to do to survive. And again, think about this stuff. Just think about it, like, okay, I'm going to college. What would I do if I was on college and something happened? Just take your mind there. You don't have to think about it every day, but every once in a while, think about it, because trust me, all of a sudden when you're scared, your mind will quickly revert to that and be like, oh, I remembered I was gonna run to my car, you know, and your body will instantly run to your car. You have to take your mind there for anything, whether it's taking a test, you know, performing in sports, like, take your mind there. You know, you have to imagine it first, and then your body will do it.
So like, the scared, like you kinda explained that a lot of active shooters, like, they study this type of stuff.
Mhm.
So as you guys train us, you know, like, a lot of times active shooters probably getting the training that
Yeah.
all of us students are getting as well, and so how, I guess, like you said, they're a step ahead of you in every sort of situation, right?
Yeah. So if you're kinda asking, like, am I worried about them hearing?
Right, cause
what-
I mean,
yeah.
if we get trained on everything, you know, and the active shooter's probably just as trained as we are on exactly what we're gonna do.
Right.
You know, so
That's what some people say, well, like, aren't you worried about a potential active shooter
Yeah.
hearing your plan? And the answer is no. There's been no case where, like, an active shooter has been able to use our plan and totally, prevent law enforcement response. And, you know, again, they can hear it all they want. It's like, I can go do, you know, a press conference and tell them exactly how I'm gonna respond if they come, you know, it doesn't matter. Because ultimately, we have to respond to them. They aren't responding to us. They aren't responding to our lockdown. They aren't responding to me running at them with a rifle, and, you know, they aren't responding to that, right? We're responding to them. So it really doesn't work that way. I understand why people think that, but we're not giving away any top secret
Yeah.
information.
Yeah, okay.
You know, we're just saying, we have this, and we're gonna do whatever we have to do to survive, so good luck in your 90 seconds before all the police officers get there. So that's essentially what it is, and again, that's why it is starting to branch out in the community, because they want total control. They don't wanna hear that. They don't wanna hear that all these students are gonna be fighting them, that police officers are gonna be bombarding them and shooting them. They don't wanna hear that. They want the control, they want everyone scared, they want it to go down how they want it to go down. So then they think, oh, well, what if I just attacked people at a concert? Or, you know, what if I went to a movie theater? You know, that's why their minds are starting to trail. But they do have this thing where they wanna one-up each other, you know? And it should be illegal to even mention any of their names, show their face on TV or anything, because these guys live for that notoriety. They wanna be infamous for, oh, you know, this guy, I won't even speak any of their names, even though I know most of their names. I won't speak it ever. And it should be a law that no media, no one can ever say their name, show their face, anything, because they just sit in their jail cell and they get off on that stuff, and that frustrates me more than anything, that they just, you know, they think it's awesome, so.
Do active shooters ever come in groups?
In groups?
Yeah.
So, occasionally, there's more than one. There hasn't been a group, so to speak, but more often than you think, they do try to recruit a friend. And that's why we try to, kind of preach to you guys, please report. If you see something, say something, do something. Because oftentimes they kinda, maybe it's in a joking manner, but in most active shooter cases, they've opened up to a friend and been like, you know, would you help me with this? Or, hey, don't go to school tomorrow because I'm thinking about tomorrow's my day. Or, hey, don't do this. They end up talking about it. And whether that's, you know, a subconscious asking for help type deal, you know, hoping someone reports them and prevents it, or maybe they're just, you know, scared to do it and they honestly want some help. But Columbine had two. There's been a couple others where there's someone else involved, but usually it's solo. It's pretty difficult to recruit, you know, someone to do something that awful with you, which I would hope is the case.
How can teachers keep their classroom safe?
Again, I think trying to have that open communication with students, hopefully building relationships with you guys so you feel safe and confident reporting stuff to that teacher, you know, if you hear something or if you're worried about anything, and hopefully the teacher is very, you know, aware of what's going on, what's being said, if they hear a comment, if they see something strange written on assignment. I hope teachers are reporting all that too, because you just don't know. You don't know where someone's mental state is, or what they're going through at home, or how much pent-up anger they have, or what's going on in their life. You don't know. Sometimes we like to think that everyone in school is just as happy as we are, but that's not always the case.
Room service.
Happy Friday.
Share your beef, Sid.
How does your helpline work? Like, are you constantly checking it to make sure you're getting reminders on it? Does it go straight to like your work phone?
What, like the text-to-tip?
Yeah.
So the text-to-tip is my SRO cell phone. So, yep, that's always on me. I'm the only one who has it. I'm not gonna say it's in my hand 24/7, you know? During the day, I always have it with me, but, you know, weekend, I might go outside and mow the lawn, and I might not see it for, you know, 2 hours or something. That's just real life, right? But I always try to respond in appropriate manners. Like, sometimes if I get a text or a call, if I see it right away, I might call police and say, hey, I need you to go over here and check on this for me. Sometimes it's just texting someone back and forth. It just depends on what's being reported and how urgent. You know, if someone's like, hey, my friend might, you know, hurt themselves, they're talking about taking their own life. Well, that's pretty urgent, right? So I need to figure out who that friend is, where they are, have officers go do a welfare check, you know, if I'm out of town. So, but even when I go out of town, I have the cell phone with me. Again, not saying I'm gonna respond immediately all the time. So if I don't respond for some reason, and you need help, please call, you know, 911 or dispatch, and another officer will help you too, okay? Because especially in summer, you know, I leave the state, I do stuff, but I do always have it with me.
Are you ever there when they have to perform welfare checks? Like, do you ever go with them?
Yeah, depending on the situation, I've gone, depend on when we get it, you know, if it's the middle of the night, sometimes I don't go. We have officers that are working in town 24/7, so if all of a sudden I get a text at 2 AM saying, you know, I'm scared for my safety right now, yeah, I just have officers go over to the house. But if I get a tip, you know, right now, of course, I'm gonna go with too, because a lot of times I know more of the backstory than the officers do. They're just going to make sure everyone's okay. They don't know what's all happening, and maybe I've been dealing with the situation for a couple weeks at school, so I try to be involved as much as I can.
So do most schools have some sort of SRO, or?
It's getting that way. It should be that way, honestly, and not too long. And it's sad, but it's good. I think SROs are just gonna be standard like a principal, you know? Every school has a counselor nowadays, right? It didn't used to be that way, but now every school has 1 or 2 counselors. I think every school needs a SRO. Again, it's not just because schools aren't safe or they need to, you know, bust kids. No, it's just that total presence and building relationships, getting to know the parents and the students and just all the benefits it can provide. It's just, and it's good for law enforcement too, you know, that we get to know the community that much better, you know, through the SROs.
Explain like a smaller, like, country type school.
Yeah.
I don't know, that doesn't have a lot of kids in it.
Yep.
A lot of those schools probably don't have something like that right now, or you said like a principal surges that, or?
No, a lot of times what happens, you know, like a deputy might be a liaison where he's maybe not in the school full time, although even small schools should just have one. And counties, cities should just pay for it. It should just be a thing. It shouldn't be on the school, like, can you afford it? Cause now these little schools are saying, we don't have that in the budget. It's like, no, the city and counties need to just pay for that and be done with it. Schools shouldn't pay anything. But, even if it's small counties and you're covering like, maybe in Barnes County here, maybe the deputy stops in at Barnes County North, sometimes goes down to Litchville, you know, and kind of makes the rounds a little bit. There at least needs to be that presence and, you know, consistency. Any officers are always encouraged to stop in. The difference is, like, there's still that, like, if I have another officer come into the school, people like get worried. You know, people think something's going on. So that's why it's good if it can be the same person, you know, like Deputy Sand goes up to BCN. So when it's Deputy Sand, nobody worries, nobody cares. But it's a different officer, then everyone's like, uh-oh, someone's in trouble, what's going on? Are we okay? Are we on lockdown? You know, so you still have to deal with that stuff too. But.
For other schools, do you think it would be a good idea to have like 1 or more, like having more like resource officers?
Yeah, you know, like in Fargo, they have resource officers all over the place, you know, 1 at each elementary, you know, sometimes not enough, they just got approved for more. Jamestown, they had a SRO, and then they had staffing issues, they pulled one out, and now they have, you know, a female SRO back in there. It's just, it's a priority, and it needs to be a priority. It does, it would, I mean, as a parent, it's my expectation that my kid's gonna be safe at school, okay? So I think you guys, if you guys have kids, your expectation would be the same. Why wouldn't you want an officer there talking about these stuff, or this stuff, and keeping it safe? It's just, it's the world.
Bella's gonna ring here in just a
Oh,
second.
okay.
Yeah. My clock's a little bit behind now. Yeah, well, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thanks
Do you have
for
any
inviting
last
me,
minute
guys.
advice for these guys as they start heading out into schools and?
Advice? No.
End up
I
with their
think
own
you guys-
classrooms?
I'm sure you guys know what you're doing more than I would. No, education is awesome that you guys are interested in that, whatever aspect you get into it. I've always respected, you know, educators, but I have even more respect for them working in the schools and stuff. I just think it's awesome, you know, and everyone who gets into it. It's important and sometimes overlooked, you know, job is like public service jobs, so I think it's awesome.
Thank you again.
Yeah.